I liked it, however, like it was effectively refuted very, very quickly. And Aaron Speechman talked about, eventually we'll have a lock partners, right? Other than that, like things happened pretty well. Like I said, you won the point about the dangers of marijuana, which was the focus of the majority of your speech. So Aaron, talking about your speech. First of all, Aaron, I liked your POI that you gave earlier on, I think, in Brett's speech. It was a very good POI, and I hope to see more engagement from the both of you in further rounds, because POIs just make for good debates usually. So your constructive is really solid. I felt for the most part your actual constructive wasn't engaged with, so they all stood. I thought the Portugal example was really good. I thought you developed the economic point very strongly, and like you did really good reconstruction. You even refuted some of Brett points, which were solid, and I was generally like really happy with your level of analysis and engagement with the round. It was actually a really, really solid speech, Aaron. The only real point of contention we had was that it was like generally a really disorganized speech, where as soon as you got into a point, you did a good job of dealing with that point, but then the way you jumped around in your speech, talking about different things, was a little disorganized and difficult to follow along. So Evelyn, your speech. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of engagement with you. Like there was really only one POI that was asked very early on, and then we didn't really see a lot from proposition after that, which is problematic because you kind of need to depend on POIs for different points for the structure of your speech. So yeah, like that's a reality that you unfortunately had to deal with. Like the points you had yourself were actually like solid. You reinforced this thing about physical dangers, and it was your insistence on this point that eventually like made it a non-contentious argument. Like it just fell on side opposition, and everyone agreed with that. So that was good. You gave more analysis to the moral harms point and talked about how, like, effectively the government is supporting marijuana, and like you said enough analysis so that Brett was able to use that in his web speech and really label that as a side for your side. So you did a lot there. But just generally in your points, like there wasn't, you touched on them, but there wasn't enough analysis, right? And you kind of know that. Where you touch on something like the universal healthcare thing, which personally I think was this really, really strong point for side opposition, probably one that could effectively destroy any economic arguments they come up with. But like because you just didn't spend enough time with it, you didn't dedicate enough structure to that point, like it really wasn't constructed fully, and it really wasn't able to like stand out in the round and make itself really good. The optics point was pretty good. I'm glad that you touched on it because it was one of the points that Brett really didn't get a chance to fully engage with. So I'm glad you really mentioned it. However, again, like it just wasn't enough analysis. I felt Otto had already done a pretty explicit job of like talking about how it actually benefits tensions between countries. So like I really wanted to hear a lot more from you as a rule, because you had great things to say, you just didn't talk about them enough. And you didn't really engage at all with Aaron's speech, right? So if you were looking for things to say, you should have spent at least 2 or 3 minutes just focusing on Aaron's point about organized crime and the economy and how it benefits trade, right? Because then you can deconstruct those. And then getting into the work speeches, and I'll be fast, but I think you were both generally pretty good at focusing on the things you won. Brett, it would have been nice if you hadn't focused so much on this rewards thing from the parents. I thought it was a bit of a stretch from Otto's speech. More importantly, like it really wasn't what he was getting at. However, your analysis about the condoning of marijuana from the government, I thought it was solid analysis, and I was glad you made it, even if it was a little late in your speech. The thing about connecting marijuana to cigarettes was solid, but again, it kind of led to the demise of your side because the cigarettes are legal, right? So like I didn't know the distinction there. As far as the rest of it, like the immoral thing, how it's inherently immoral, I wanted more analysis there. I don't know why it's immoral as opposed to just like a personal choice, right? It would have been nice if that was stood out. And then in your speech, Otto, I thought you harped on the right things as far as themes of the round, but I didn't think that your analysis on the role of government was like to my satisfaction. Like you talked about, to paraphrase, you talked about there's a group of people and there's a lot of them, so like the government should probably protect these people, right? Because it's like their job. Which is like, okay, it's true, but like I would have rather have heard a lot of analysis on the government's role to like maximize liberties and how liberties are great and how the government doesn't have a certain role in certain people's individual freedoms and stuff like that, and how a lot of things fall under the very, very private sphere, not like the social government sphere or anything. And I wanted to hear about like how this is one of those things, right? Where, like the government doesn't get to tell you what to do in this instance, right? So it would have been nice if we talked a little bit more about that. Just a little bit more developed analysis on the government role. But everything else is right. Like you pinpointed the fact it didn't have any analysis on the immoral part. It didn't have any analysis on why this should be illegal as opposed to just being kind of dangerous, right? So like you were right to harp on everything. And at the end of the day, you probably won the children point, which was like a big point, right? Even though it was like fairly contentious. So for us, it was a fairly easy decision. If you guys have any questions, let me know right now. Anything? Everyone good? Cool. All right.